In 1942, a Soviet woman stood in front of a crowd of 50,000 people in Chicago. She was 25 years old. She had already killed more enemy soldiers than any female combatant in recorded history. A reporter in the front row raised his hand. His question was about her lipstick. Her answer ended his career. Here is what you need to understand about Lyudmila Pavlichenko before she picked up a rifle. She was not supposed to be a soldier. She was born in 1916 in Bila Tserkva, a small city in Ukraine, the daughter of a factory worker. By the time she was 20, she was a history student at Kiev University, married, briefly, to a man she divorced almost immediately, and a single mother raising a young son. She worked in a munitions factory to support herself through school. She was also, quietly, one of the best sport shooters in Ukraine. She had joined the Osoavyakim, a Soviet paramilitary organization that trained civilians in shooting, parachuting, and other military skills, at 16. By the time the war started, she had already earned her marksmanship badge. She knew exactly what she was doing with a rifle. What she didn't know was that within 18 months, she would use that skill to kill 309 human beings. And that the Soviet Union would send her to America, not to fight, but to talk. And that America, in 1942, was completely unprepared for what she had to say. June 22, 1941. Germany invades the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers crossed the border in a single day, the largest military invasion in human history. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was 24 years old. She was at a Kiev dance hall when she heard the news on the radio. She went home, put her son to bed, and the next morning walked to the military recruitment office. The recruiter looked at her and suggested she become a nurse. She placed her marksmanship certificate on his desk. He assigned her to the 25th Chapayev Rifle Division. She was one of approximately 2,000 women who volunteered as snipers in the Soviet military during the Second World War. Most of them did not survive. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was not most of them. A sniper's war is nothing like the war in the history books. There are no charges, no artillery barrages, no dramatic last stands. A sniper's war is silence and patience and mathematics. It is lying motionless for hours in mud or rubble while calculating wind speed and bullet drop and the exact moment when a human target presents itself at the right angle for the right duration. And then it is a decision. A deliberate, conscious, personal decision to end a life. Lyudmila Pavlichenko made that decision 309 times in less than a year. Her first confirmed kill was near Odessa in August 1941. She was assigned to defend the city against Romanian forces allied with the Germans. The fighting around Odessa lasted 73 days. By the time Soviet forces were evacuated, Pavlichenko had 187 confirmed kills. 187 in 73 days. She was then transferred to the siege of Sevastopol, the brutal 8-month battle for the Crimean port city. The conditions were apocalyptic. German and Romanian forces bombarded the city continuously. Soviet defenders held ruined positions with dwindling supplies and no prospect of relief. Pavlichenko continued her work. Among her 309 confirmed kills, 36 were enemy snipers. This number matters. German and Romanian snipers were specifically tasked with finding and eliminating her. She was known. She had a reputation. Enemy commanders sent their best marksmen to hunt her. She killed 36 of them. One duel lasted 3 days. 3 days of 2 people lying in rubble within perhaps 200 meters of each other, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. On the third day, Pavlichenko fired once. She recovered the German sniper's rifle as a trophy. She kept it. In June 1942, a German artillery shell exploded near her position. She was wounded by shrapnel, her third wound of the war. This time, Soviet command made a decision. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was too valuable to risk losing in Sevastopol. They pulled her out, gave her the rank of major, and sent her somewhere no Soviet soldier had ever been sent before. They sent her to America. August 1942. Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived in Washington, D.C. as part of a Soviet student delegation, a propaganda mission, officially. The real purpose was to pressure the United States and Britain to open a second front in Western Europe and relieve the pressure on the Eastern Front, where the Soviet Union was dying by the millions. She was 25 years old. She had killed 309 people. She had been wounded 3 times. She had watched Odessa and Sevastopol burn. She arrived in a country that had been in the war for 8 months and had not yet seen combat on its own soil. A country where the war was something that happened somewhere else. The culture shock was immediate and mutual. The American press did not know what to do with her. They knew she was a soldier. They knew she had an extraordinary combat record. And they responded by asking her about her hair. One reporter asked if she wore makeup in the field. Another wanted to know about her uniform, specifically whether Soviet women soldiers were issued skirts or trousers. A Chicago newspaper ran a piece suggesting that her uniform was not very flattering and wondering whether American fashion designers might help the Soviet war effort by redesigning it. This was not fringe journalism. These were major American publications. This was how a significant portion of the American media in 1942 processed the existence of a woman who had killed 309 enemy soldiers. Lyudmila Pavlichenko processed it differently. Chicago, a rally of 50,000 people. Pavlichenko stepped up to the microphone. She spoke through an interpreter, but the words were entirely hers. I am 25 years old, and I have already killed 309 fascist invaders. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long? The crowd erupted. Those 2 sentences were reported in newspapers across America the following day. They were broadcast on radio. They were reprinted in Britain. The folk singer Guthrie wrote a song about her. The reporters who had asked about her lipstick were not mentioned in any of the follow-up coverage. She met President Franklin Roosevelt at the White House. She was the first Soviet citizen to be received by an American president. Eleanor Roosevelt, who accompanied her on part of the American tour, later wrote in her memoir that Pavlichenko was one of the most composed and formidable people I have ever met. She said this about a woman who, 6 months earlier, had been lying in Sevastopol rubble waiting for a German sniper to make a mistake. After Washington, Pavlichenko toured Canada, then Britain. Everywhere she went, she said the same thing in different rooms to different crowds. The Soviet Union is dying. Open the second front. Stop hiding behind our backs. The second front did not open until 1944. By then, the Soviet Union had lost over 20 million people. Lyudmila Pavlichenko never returned to combat. Soviet command kept her in training and propaganda roles for the remainder of the war. She trained new snipers, passing on the techniques that had kept her alive through 309 kills and 3 wounds. She gave speeches. She represented the Soviet Union at international conferences. She hated it. In interviews given after the war, she said repeatedly that she felt guilty, that while she was speaking in comfortable rooms, her comrades were dying. That the work she was doing, however useful, was not the work she had chosen. She had chosen a rifle and a position and a specific, terrible kind of purpose. What she got instead was a microphone. After the war, she completed her history degree at Kiev University, the degree the invasion had interrupted. She became a researcher at the Soviet Navy's headquarters. She wrote a memoir. She lived quietly in Moscow. She died in 1974 at the age of 58. Heart disease, accelerated by the wounds and the stress of the war years. The Soviet Union issued a commemorative stamp with her face on it. In the decades after her death, her story was kept alive almost entirely in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. In the English-speaking world, she was a footnote, occasionally mentioned in lists of famous women, almost never given the full weight of what she had actually done. Let me tell you what 309 actually means. The average German infantry division in 1942 contained approximately 15,000 men. The average casualty rate in major engagements on the Eastern Front was around 30% before a unit was pulled back to refit. That means Lyudmila Pavlichenko, alone, with a rifle, accounted for the equivalent of roughly 2% of an entire division's casualties. One woman, a rifle, less than a year. The reporter who asked about her lipstick was not available for comment. Here is the question I keep coming back to. When Lyudmila Pavlichenko stood in front of 50,000 people in Chicago and said, "Don't you think you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" She was not angry. Watch the footage. She is not angry. She is something colder and more precise than anger. She is stating a fact. The way a sniper states a fact about wind speed and distance. Precisely. Without emotion. Because emotion is not useful. What is useful is accuracy. The Americans in that crowd had been reading about the Eastern Front in their newspapers. They knew abstractly that it was bad. They did not know what it looked like from inside it. Pavlichenko knew. She had been inside it for a year. She had the wounds to prove it. And she stood in front of them and told them the truth in 2 sentences. 50,000 people heard it. The Second Front still didn't open for 2 more years. History is full of people who told the truth clearly and precisely and were not listened to quickly enough. Sources are in the description. Her memoir, the Roosevelt Archive records, and the Chicago rally footage, which still exists and which I strongly recommend you watch. Subscribe if you're new. Next in this series, the Soviet sniper who was 19 years old kept a diary and was deliberately erased by her own commanders. That story is coming. And if anyone ever asks you to name the deadliest female combatant in recorded history, now you know. Her name was Lyudmila Pavlichenko. She was 25 years old, and she was done hiding behind anybody's back.